Hey guys, how you doing? Today I want to go over something that I find kind of interesting, and I wanted to look into, was CPP a good investment if you're 65 years old today and about to collect? And that's all we're going to look into today. Should be some good water cooler conversation, if anything, not really helping with planning. So let's get into it. All right, so like I said, what I wanted to look at was, is CPP a good investment, or was it a good investment if you're 65 years old in 2024, you've maxed it out your entire life, and now, you're about to collect. Was it a good investment? There's a lot of opinions online about whether or not this is the case. I'm going to try and keep my opinions out of it, and I'm just going to run through the numbers and talk about a few interesting things that I found, how much you've paid into CPP, all of those other things. So let's get started. You're 65 in 2024. You started working, when you were 15, but you started contributing to CPP when you're 18 and always paid the maximum amount off of your income into CPP. Now, how much have you actually paid into CPP since 1977? And before we throw out this graph and these numbers, I want you to guess, how much do you think you've actually paid into CPP? And I want to see if you're high or low. So you got a number in your head. What you have put into CPP since 1977 of your own money is $68,327. Your employer has also matched that number, so they've put in $68,327 on your behalf. So you should thank them because they've paid into your pension plan with you, which is very nice of them, I think, for a total of $136,655.20. Now, another thing that I want you to realize is that your CPP contributions generate a tax credit. So it wasn't even quite that much money that you have put into CPP because you've generated a tax credit, and your employer gets a tax deduction for their contributions on your behalf. So the number is actually smaller once you take in the credits and the deductions into account. Now, I want to look at how much, I know how much we pay into CPP today, but when in 1977, when you were 18, you were putting in a whopping $151.20 a year into CPP to start creating your pension plan, which is 24.83 times lower than it is today. We're putting in $3,754 each if we're making over YMPE. So that really hasn't gone up with inflation. Something that I know that is happening is that the younger people, the people that are still working, are putting an absolutely huge amount of money into CPP to make sure that this plan is solvent. So one of the other big problems that I have right now, especially because of how hard things are, is looking at how much this is costing employees and employers every single year, especially employers who have multiple staff that are making over YMPE. Because since 2019, the amount of money that we need to put into CPP on our employees' behalf has increased by $1,000 or more a year in the last 5 years. So imagine you have 50 employees, that's $50,000 of extra money coming out of your pocket, going into CPP on your employees' behalf. This is due mostly, not just due to inflation, mostly due to the CPP enhancement phase 1, which just finished. So I think that's one of the many reasons that small business owners right now are really struggling, is because every single one of our costs has gone up while our profit margins have gone down due to inflation, more expensive goods, more expensive staff, more expensive absolutely everything. And this is just adding on to the pile. But what are we going to do about that? I don't know. So we come back to the number, and I said, okay, well, what would have happened? How much would that have been worth if you invested this money on your own? You know, you invested this money on your own and it grew at 5% per year. So like I said, you've put in $68,327, but your contributions are changing every year. So if you add that up and it grows at 5% a year, your half would be worth $163,864. So the combined total with you and your employer would be $327,728. That money that you guys have put in has grown by 5%. It's like saying the equivalent of an RSP worth $327,728. So if you had a group RSP that was putting in those exact same contributions, grew at 5%, that's what it would be worth. So then after we have that number, we have to look backwards and say, okay, how big of an RSP would you need to have to be able to pay out what the max CPP payout is at 65? So right now it's paying $1,364.58 per month. One good thing about CPP is that it's indexed to inflation, so it goes up every single year. Your payments and your pension goes up every single year. So how big of an RSP would you have had to be able to pay out that amount of money over the rest of your lifetime, depending on when you actually pass away? So the assumptions I've used here is that you're getting a 5% rate of return on your RSP, and inflation is 2.1%. So roughly your real rate of return on that is 2.9%, keeping up with inflation, growing beyond it, and paying you out that much, and ending at zero the day that you die. So if you died at 75 years old, in order to be able to pay yourself out that much, you would have needed an RSP of $141,996. At 80, $198,981. 85, 248, 284, 90, 290, 939, and this one's interesting. 95 is 327, 843. That's almost identical to what the total would have been if your contributions with your employers were added up together in the same thing. So then I looked and said, well, how old would you have had to been in order for just your contributions to have an RSP that size? And it was, what, 76.8 or something like that? Which was, 76.83 years old if you passed away right then. So I think that's exactly what the actuaries are looking for, is like, okay, how is this going to match with like the longest sort of living person, basically? And then also looking at somebody that's dying right around sort of the average life expectancy of a Canadian, give or take a little bit. And obviously their inflation numbers and rates of return could have been different because I used 5 and 2.1, but I found it really interesting how close those numbers were to life expectancy, and then them being like, holy, we're going to lose money if somebody lives to 95 or 100. Now, the next part that I kind of wanted to get into was how much will it actually have paid out? Because this is really, you don't know what your investments would have done. We know that you've put in $68,327. How long is it going to take you to get that money back out? And how much money is CPP going to pay out if you live to certain ages? Like, what's the running total of that amount if it's paying out and inflation is growing at 2.1%? So at 75 years old, it will have paid out to you $192,277. 80, $311,101. 85, $448, $184. 90, $606,330. and 95, 788,777. So when you start looking at those numbers, it actually starts to be like, well, that was not too bad of a deal when you look at it that way. So if you live a really long time, you've only put $68,000 of your own money into it, you're getting close to 800,000 paid out by the time you're 8 or 95 years old. You win. You beat the CRA. You beat Justin Trudeau. Congratulations. I am proud of you. You know, obviously pensions work very poorly for people that pass away really early into retirement. You've paid way too much money into it, and you've helped fund somebody else's retirement and not your children's. I understand why that's upsetting. So the only other thing that I wanted to look at there was at what point does the break-even point happen where you've been paid out more than what you've put in? And you only need to live until 69 to get more than that 68,327 back. And if you live till 74, you're going to get more than both you and your employer put back in, which was 136,655. So anyway, I hope you learned something. I hope you think it was interesting. I'm kind of excited for the comments here to see like who wants to yell at me about what. I'm not sure. I'm not really saying anything other than these are the numbers I found, but I'm sure some people will be angry with me for whatever reason because people on the internet like to get angry. But for those of you that liked it, please like, subscribe, and share. It's the best way to help this channel grow and help this little business. So we're very thankful for all of that. And we love the comments, good or bad, and love to hear from you. So chat with you soon. Bye.